I think we're ready to go. I guess digitally, we have, Lisa, are we all good to go in terms of everything else for minutes and recording the meeting? Okay, perfect. Excellent. Dave gives us a thumbs up too. I think we are good to go, Diana.
All right. Sounds good. We'll call the meeting together for the tax increment district or the joint review board for June 23rd at 11 a.m. We will take a roll call. Bradley Klingsborn.
Here.
Peter Ross.
Present.
Bob Matthews.
Actually,
Gina
Gina is here on Bob's behalf today.
Thank you. Gina is here. And then we have Brent Weicker.
Yes.
And then Diana Ellenbecker from the city is here.
Excellent.
All right.
Thank you. Yep.
Then we'll move on to the approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a move by Brent, second by Peter. All in favor?
Aye.
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 That's approved. Move down to the approval of the minutes from the meeting on April 8th, 2021.
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
All right, we had a motion by Bradley and second by Gino. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
That is approved. We'll move on to regular business. The item is review the tax increment district annual reports. Obviously, there's a lot of information here. It's a large packet. As we've done in the past, we try to take all that information, the DOR reports, and we summarize it on one spreadsheet. I think that's a little bit easier as a snapshot. Do you have questions right from the beginning? Do you want me to go through a lot of detail? How do you want me to handle this? I can give you as much detail, as little detail as you want. Any suggestions?
I'm good with the 20,000 foot view.
Okay. We'll go over them very quickly, very high level. And please stop me. I will touch on every one real quick, but I don't even know if I have to touch them all. TID 4 is our oldest, and still it has a term date of 2025. I'm good. That one is just running just smoothly. That's TID 4. TID 5, there was a lot that happened in TID 5 in this past year. That district got amended, and we moved out the shipyard out of the TID 5. So we created TID 22 instead in the shipyard. So there was a lot of movement of revenues and expenses and then projections. And that also there was money that was allocated to TID 9. So there was a lot of movement. 5. So, we started at 1.9 million at the beginning of the year. We went down to about $900,000. We still expect some large expenditures in this TID 5. But we will need those last couple of years to finish out paying for those projects. But again, a lot happened in TID 5, but now that has now been carved out. The shipyard has been carved out, and this is. Move on to 7, 8, and 9. All three of them were closed in 2020. So if you looked at last year's projections of future costs and future revenues, numbers have changed a lot because we have now closed out those TIDs. We've had some allocations out of those TIDs. So shows very little movement or future activity for those TIDs. TID 10 is our next one, Maine and Mason, and that one has not a lot of expenditures at this point. We have just started working with our development team to work on some future projects for this TID, as we have income coming in and not as many expenditures. So we are working on projects to this is Maine and Mason. There's plenty of stormwater projects that we can use down in Maine and Mason. We move on to TID 12. This is a TID. Also, there was quite a bit of activity that went on last year and this year. The increment is over $2 million, but we also had a lot of projects going on, mostly for one of our large development in the I-43 development. It was the Nature's Way. So getting infrastructure into that TID. We continue to It also had a allocation to TIF 9 that was approved last year. So still some future costs that are being still worked on and we're already obligated and completed with some future revenues coming through. We'll go on to TID 13. That one is our downtown TID. Have a lot of expenditures here, as you can see. It's a negative fund balance. We do have more increment coming in than we do have show future expenses. We do show that this TID will turn positive in about the next 2 years. So at this point, there's no new projects. No new infrastructure projects planned in here. We do have potential some new development going on downtown, which will help our increment. But the goal still is within 2 to 3 years that this one will turn positive. Go on to the TID 14, which is our rail yard area. That we're starting to see some nice improvement in the tax increment. We also had some large infrastructure projects in there. We also did some borrowing in this TID. So it went from a negative fund balance of $3 million down to about 2.5. And this one also, based on projections, in about 2 years, we are looking to have this one as a positive fund balance. Again, we have a lot of activity going on in TID 14, and the director will talk to you after we go through the annual reports of some of the additional new projects coming through. TIF 16, which is our Military Avenue, very little activity there at this point, starting to show a positive fund balance. Finally, in 2020, we rolled to a positive fund balance. And so we are looking at some future stormwater projects in this TIF before closure. TIF 18, University Avenue, the Festival Foods down out on that side, our JBS out on that side. Negative fund balance, and that is partially because of a project that was started at JBS. We just haven't seen the increment to go with that project. We did have an upfront project grant of $1.5 million, and that's why you're seeing a negative fund. But the director also has some positive information on that TID, but we are seeing some positive movement on this TID. Then we get into Easttown Mall. As you know, we had high expectations of changes in Easttown Mall. But we were lucky to get some change in the Cub Foods. We have some changes going on there now. But so this one still remains very little activity. We haven't done any payouts other than some now pay-goes for increment that's been created. So it's still small positive fund balance. Looking for some bigger changes coming down the pipe. Whitney Park, very new development. We haven't seen much increment yet. That will all be coming online for the 1/1 of 21, which will affect. We'll see the increment really at the beginning of next year. Again, that one just has a negative fund balance, but for a few administrative costs, a few minor costs. Same thing, Green Bay Packaging. Green Bay Packaging has by the time we ended the year, we had a negative fund balance of $31,000. But 1/1 of 21, we do have increment of $1.6 million that came in from Green Bay Packaging. This is our large pay-go. We do have a 90% pay-go that goes out to Green Bay Packaging, as we have very little infrastructure costs that we have so far put into this TID. So right now it's looking negative 31. By next year, we'll have a nice positive fund balance. And again, we'll start paying out a large 90% pay-go on this in this TID. We go on to the shipyard again. There was a lot of change. This was a new TIF that was created. We moved out all expenditures and all revenues that were brought in for the TIF yard and that district that was removed out of TID 5. We had some new bonding in 2020 of $2 million. We transferred in about $1.7 million from TID 5. So started off very small because it was just a brand new TID. And at the end of the year, we are sitting at about a $2.6 million fund balance. But again, that is the majority of that is because of borrowing and for future projects at the shipyard. Phase 1 will be happening this fall, and then the director will talk to that. So right now it looks positive. We just haven't spent down some of the money that we borrowed yet for that project. The Legend District, a very new TID at this point, very little activity. But it will be receiving $850,000 in 2021 from our TID. That was a project that was started in TID 7. It was pedestrian walkways that was not able to complete prior to us closing. So we got approval to allocate $850,000 from TID 7 to TID 23, which will be then able to be spent in this TID and use that for infrastructure in this district. I know I flew right through it. please let me know what questions you have. I got thumbs up from Peter.
I just want to clarify, though, it was 7, 8, 9 that closed in 2020?
7, 8, and 9 all closed in 2020, correct?
Okay, thank you.
And I think Director had asked the question, and should I steal his thunder? Between the three of them that we closed, they had an increment value of $58,970,000. So overall, our equalized value, our TID stats, we're currently at 7.3% of the 12% that we can have open for TIDs. These three that we closed are about a 0.8%. So we go from about a 7.3% to about a 6.5%. So we dropped about our allowable TIDs by closing these three TIDs. Any other questions? Otherwise, we would take a motion. I guess this is just to receive and place on file. If there are no changes or questions, there was a recommendation. We had some spelling mistakes on our DOR report. So thank you to Bradley. We are going to be fixing those before we submit them to DOR. But if you have no changes, we would be submitting them as presented in the packet. And again, this would be a receive and place on file then.
Before we do that, I have a question. So a couple, the next mandatory term dates, there's a couple 2025, 26s. And when you were going through, you were talking about a few infrastructure projects that could be done. Is there any discussion on what's going to happen next? And whether instead of doing the infrastructure project with incremental value there now, rather aim to terminate a couple years early and create a new TID in these areas, because there will be an ongoing effort to develop, I'm thinking like TID 5, TID 10. I'd imagine that in 2027, there's going to be a TID there. It just isn't going to be the same one that we created here.
We've had some discussions. On a weekly basis, we meet with our development team. And TID 5, as you know, as you were just mentioning, TID 5 actually has an expenditure period that ends in December of 21 here. So we have been looking at some projects that still could be completed this year to make sure that we could use projects that are needed in TID 5. So at this point, we have not had any discussion of closing TID 5 early, as some of these expenditures will really take our fund balance down, and that we'll need a little bit of more future revenues to kind of bring it back up. But at this point, there was no discussion of closing that one early. And then that really the next one that has the next termination date would be, yes, TID 10. And at this point, our expenditure period doesn't end until 2026. So again, the discussion and the plan at this point was to move forward and continue to have some projects up until 2026. We did not discuss closing this one down and then creating a new one. Certainly up for discussion. Certainly some of those are, those are the two options: spend up to your expenditure period, or close and create new.
And I would add, Brad, certainly if we get a new project, certainly it's probably going to be in our interest to do that anyway, because we're going to need the life of a new district to help out, especially if it's a significant project. So that certainly remains a possibility, but I think it's something we haven't really made a determination on yet at this point.
Yeah, and just kind of if you extend TID period with the need to have the incremental value to pay that off, then you can't really do anything in that non-expenditure period. Whereas if you don't expend and you're able to close, then you have the flexibility to do more things in the future. So
absolutely.
Bring that up. The other question I had was the agreement packaging PAYCO agreement. Does that go through 2045? The 90% PAYCO?
Give me a moment. I have to look up I'm going to look up the spreadsheet real quick. Make sure I have the right answer for you.
Not that any of us will care too much in 2044 about whether the TID is active, but I was curious.
Yeah.
Because if the PAYCO goes until 2045, then that's just locked in until 2045, and it just coasts.
Through a tax year of 2045, payable in 2046. Correct.
Okay. All right. Well, that one is just coasting there for the next 24 years.
Money in, money out. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But they did just have their actual ribbon cutting for the plant here just about a month ago. So it was nice to see that they actually followed through on it. So
That sounds great. I will make a motion to receive.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Gina. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That passes. We'll move on to the second regular business item, staff report on the performance and status of each district governed by the board. And the director will take this one.
yep, I'm just going to kind of race through some just specific project updates, some of the key ones in some of the districts, and we'll see if it just, again, want to see if folks have any questions on that. So hopefully projects update hopefully is coming up on the screen.
Yes.
All right, perfect, great, excellent. So we'll hop right in. Obviously, here's our map of all of our districts. Certainly the 2021 map will remove 7, 8, and 9 from this map, but they'll no longer be on here. Again, but just kind of remind folks where the districts are at here throughout the city. Here, TID 14, the Washington Apartments, or TID 4, I don't believe we had a whole lot of activity on this one. This is just a reminder where this one is at. Again, so between Mason Street and just past a little bit past Walnut Street, right on the river there. Similarly, here's our TID 5 downtown. Again, this is one we have seen some significant activity in. Recall that there was a small property amendment. I believe some of this property was removed from TID 5 here, and right in this area here where the cursor is on the screen. That was a boundary amendment that was done. So again, the area was taken out of that district. I think a particular area of focus going forward on certainly here for this coming year, two aspects of it. Really, the parking lot here in the near part of the photo here. City's actively considering getting an RFP reissued for that particular lot for redevelopment on that site. However, we are also working with kind of some of the owners of the Bay Lake City Center building there in terms of what the possible future use of that building may end up being. We're evaluating several concepts right now. The original concept actually called for that building to be removed and some open space to be added near the authenticity plan, if folks remembered that. There's enough users in that building right now that are kind of proposing some new uses. So we're still kind of evaluating and working with those property owners as to whether or not some sort of new mixed use may actually end up occurring in that Bay Lake building. Obviously, that certainly impacts our ability, we think, to RFP the Adams Street lot and get a development project on that side as well. But again, so we could be seeing some significant changes on this either one or both sites here, certainly in the coming future here. So got a lot of work that we needed to make that happen one way or the other. But again, certainly probably one of the most highest potential locations, I think, for redevelopment, certainly in the city right now, whether that's reuse of the existing building or just, a new project on the city's parking lot that they have right there. So stay tuned on this one. Hopefully we have some more information one way or the other on that one going forward. This is, again, here's TID 10, the Main and Mason TIF district. Again, kind of reminding folks where that exactly. No real activity in that one at this point. TID 12, we mentioned, certainly this is the I-43 Business Park. We've got a lot of, interest and activity. Certainly staff is taking a very hard look at this in terms of expanding the park here, certainly with the life of TID 12 being where it's at. Certainly that obviously presents some challenges in terms of being able to utilize the existing district to move that forward. So we'll talk a little bit about perhaps a future project, future district need on what that might look like going forward here at some point. One project that is happening in that area, there's a major Baycare expansion project happening for the facility that's there in this particular area. I think we estimated this, so you may bring up my notes here, about a $12 million new clinic. It's about 130,000 square feet. So a very nice project occurring. There is no direct assistance being added for that particular project. So there is no TIF assistance. So that's just new increment going into that particular site. So we're certainly excited about that one. And I believe they just broke ground on that one here, actually within the last month or so, I believe. TID 13, obviously this is one we see some significant activity possibly coming up here in the future, but right now, no specific project. We mentioned the rail yard, certainly the one project that's here on this part. So here's the rail line at the river. certainly the fort is probably the one project that's out there. Folks kind of notice the elevator shafts that are up right now with not much other construction activity going on. The developer has kind of lost part of their investment stack essentially, and is kind of trying to reestablish really what their overall financing plan is going to be. At this point, they're certainly trying to work and adjust, probably advancing and maybe going for some WIDA tax credits in terms of some affordable housing project in this area. And also working with staff right now in terms of evaluating the mixed use status on the bottom floor of the building. I think the city's position has been we kind of want to see that commercial component really to kind of remain on that bottom part there, but that may be presenting some challenges for the developer, specifically with regard to financing the project. So we are currently kind of in negotiations for them. Ideally, if we get something worked out and we see some additional construction work happening here yet sometime this fall, if everything went perfectly. So I mentioned the TID 16 Military Avenue District. Here's the area here. No specific real projects happening in that district to report on. The University Avenue project, TID 18, this is a major one. I think Director Ellenbecker did mention the DeVillers project. There are two buildings were constructed on the site. But then the developer, after about 100, I think it was 1.5 million, Diana, was it we put in there for essentially for cleanup of the JBS site, I believe was the number. Got a couple buildings started here, but the developers kind of had, again, not unable to proceed with the project for financially at this point. We are in negotiations with a new developer to kind of present a similar, a different residential concept. It's kind of going from, I think it was essentially it was 322 units at a value of about $21.9 million. So we have a new developer proposing 209 units, but at the same valuation. So a little bit larger, a little bit bigger units, but the same value. So we're excited. We're in negotiations, kind of getting that transferred over right now. We'd like to see that hopefully move forward here to both the RDA and City Council, hopefully within the next 30 to 60 days. So there are some challenges in terms of getting the infrastructure lined up. If it was one developer, they could kind of use a private drive. Since now there's going to be more than one owner there probably needs to be some public street infrastructure that's going to be needed there as part of the project. So we're kind of evaluating that, working with both developers to try to figure out exactly what that's going to end up looking like. But excited to finally kind of see some progress on this one. I know our RDA has been kind of following up on this one and noting the lack of progress. Hopefully, again, with the new developer, we think we can get this jump started and get probably even a little bit nicer set of units on the site, even though the number is not quite as many units. But I think the quality of the unit and size of the unit will actually be a little bit better on this site. So fingers crossed that proceeds here this coming year. We mentioned the Easttown Mall project, or Easttown Mall TIF here. This is the reminder of where this is at. The structure here that's going on here, this is a rather unique project that is happening here right now. American Tent is actually being located in kind of the back half of these kind of giant buildings. So it's kind of an industrial user, and all of the commercial retail tenants are kind of being moved and relocated to the front of the building. So for the outside perspective of folks just driving by, it's going to kind of look like a usual mall, but it's going to have a rather large industrial tenant in the back. Very fast growing company, American Tent Company, is going to put one of their production space kind of back here in the back half of this building. So very unique combination of uses. We're also seeing some interest in kind of generating some additional work on some of the outlots related to kind of the inner ring road, I guess we could call, for lack of a better term, and actually kind of making that inner road, instead of just kind of a drive around the aisle of the mall, actually being more of a functional public street access with actual businesses on both sides. So we could be looking at adding some infill to these areas. And obviously those parking lots are what they are. They're large paved areas that don't generate a lot of increment. So hopefully we could actually figure out a way to kind of update. I think Dave Buck is on the line. He said there's more than a dozen planned unit developments, I think, on this particular site. So we're trying to work and try to get a kind of a master zoning reestablished for the area that will kind of allow us to take a look at some of those things, including adding some of those additional infill developments possibly on some of these areas, particularly like this main entrance here. We could see certainly buildings occurring on both sides of that and kind of continuing this drive back to the main part of the mall. We think there's some good opportunities there to kind of add some infill development to this particular area. I mentioned Whitney Park. I think a lot of the updates, a lot of the projects were completed. I think in this area last year were reported to the Joint Review Board, and I think those were illustrated last year. Kind of working with them right now to kind of see exactly when they're going to receive their first payment. It was largely based on occupancy permit, which I don't think they got until January 1. They just kind of missed the deadline, so it kind of is delaying their increment by a year. They were a little surprised by that, so we may be bringing an amendment back to the RDA to try to at least get something back to them this year for based on the assessment, based on the substantial completion of the project. So that's probably coming forward to RDA here in July, we suspect. I mentioned Green Bay Packaging. Again, this was the largest. This is probably, I think, looking back at the files, this is apparently the first new paper mill constructed in Wisconsin in the last 30 years. So pretty impressive project. Obviously, an enormous investment on the company's part, as well as from the TIF standpoint. This is probably the largest project I'm anticipating seeing, certainly for our foreseeable future. But again, a great project, and glad to see the employer kind of retaining those jobs here in Green Bay. So, and plus hopefully adding a few more when things normalize a little. So, Shipyard is probably where we've seen the most excitement on here the last couple months. Again, here's a map of the district with kind of the close-up of the area here. The reason, just to remind folks, because I certainly had to ask, the reason this bizarre strip goes out here is that is exactly what the parcel is along the rail line. So that we had to, in order to just take that parcel in, we actually had to go, this is actually one whole parcel, this whole stretch out here. So there's no projects or no increment obviously going to happen on that. It's just simply the logistics of the map. We had to have that was part of the parcel that was included down in this area. So we simply had to include that strange stretch out down the side there. So I think the main project, obviously the shipyard here in general, here's the concept plan. The main project that was announced here earlier this year, we have a signed development agreement with Merge Urban Development. Their project is about 225 units of market rate housing, about $21 million project. I think it's going to be, see, how many buildings do we see? I think it's going to be two 4-story buildings, I believe, is kind of what they're proposing on the site. Very unique design in that it maintains visual access for most of the units to the river. So they've actually done some kind of unique design aspects there to make that happen. Shortly after this was announced, we have a planning option has been pulled on the Badger sheet metal site, kind of immediately adjacent to this site here. Impact 7 is actually proposing and kind of currently evaluating a 238 unit project that's actually at more targeted rental rate for the 80 to 110% of the county median income. So again, a little bit lower than market rate, kind of in that middle median income number, which is a unique aspect. This is our first project that's actually targeting kind of that center income. So not, kind of there's affordable and market rate. These are kind of guys are right in the middle. So we're kind of excited that they're filling a targeted need. We don't have a projected valuation on that. This is just still working on that, but at least preliminary estimates are saying it's a $45 to $50 million construction cost. So that'd be 3 4-story buildings is going to be the massing on that site. So a nice sized project there. So we're excited to see some momentum kind of finally building here in the shipyard area. And then TID 23, this is the Legends District. Again, the primary project, I think you guys have seen this one before. This is the Legacy Hotel project that's being proposed. We're currently working through with them. They actually did a relocation on their site from one side of the site to the other. That affected some code questions and raised some issues to make that work. We're also thinking the valuation is probably largely going to remain the same. This is a $12 million 5-story building, about 90,000 square feet. Would like to see, hopefully get something worked out, an updated development agreement completed with them here yet this summer, and see some progress on the site here maybe as early as this fall. So again, it could be a nice project over there by in the Legends District close to Lambeau Field. I think Director Ellenbecker already mentioned these. These were the actions that we took at the Joint Review Board meeting and the RDA here this earlier this year. Just to remind everybody, this is kind of what we went through. The allocation amendments and the housing resolutions. At least were all completed earlier this year. Just a quick reminder on that. We are looking at some possible new districts in terms of staff reviewing, when we might need to do these here. We're looking at, there's one for the One Astor project, which I think this body has probably seen before, but has been delayed for multiple reasons. Coal piles being one of them, pandemic being another. Add to the list as far as you go. If folks have driven by there, they've actually seen the Fox River Trail actually being installed and actually going in on this site. So some of the improvements have begun on the site. We're excited to see those. Hasn't been officially dedicated on there, and I think we're already seeing several hundred people a day already going down this section of trail, much to the private owner's dismay, despite his efforts to block it off. So folks are excited about it. They want to use the trail. The Monroe project that we're going to have is a nice project. We'll kind of highlight that here shortly. And I mentioned previously, kind of maybe an update for the pending business park expansion. And there is a blight elimination TID in the northeast neighborhood. We are taking a look at possibly as a staff to considering that as a possibility. So we do know that the One Astor project and the Monroe Street project are going to require a new TIF district for sure. We know eventually the I-43 one will as well. But again, exactly what the timing of those is going to be is still a little bit up in the air. One of these could, certainly they could move forward this year. We think probably One Astor will probably need to move forward this year. So we'll probably be reaching out to you guys again for a meeting on that particular district. Monroe, I think it could be this year. It could be next year. I think we're evaluating with the developer exactly what their schedule is going to be. I-43, there's some other zoning issues and several landowners out there that we're still doing some coordination on with that. And I think the planning staff is kind of evaluating this northeast neighborhood area still in terms of its potential to create a district. But those are the ones that are at least on the radar screen right now in terms of creating new ones. And this was the One Astor project. Again, just 4 stories, 100 units. I think it was estimated at about $13 million in value. So again, that was the project that's kind of going on right there by the Mason Street Bridge. This would be what would be going on. I think ideally we get the agreement updated. They could be doing some site work and then actually have the trail installations going in and actually see the project under construction as early as next spring. The one that's generating a lot of the excitement, I think, at least among staff, this is the 200 North Monroe project being proposed. That is about $22 million project. It's a 3 to 5 story building. You kind of see the difference in the height, depending as the architect actually lowered the height as it goes to the residential neighborhood next to it. 172 units, mixed use project. Not only are we excited about obviously adding the residential units, it also includes expanding the Main Street Oriental market here and actually relocating across the street into this site, kind of expanding the grocery options downtown, which has been a major objective. The other one is I think there's negotiations going on possibly with UWGB to be a lease tenant in this building and actually get them to have a presence downtown, which again, the city has been working on for quite some time and would be pretty excited to have that. So those projects all together just kind of give folks some perspective. We did kind of add that. It looks like it's actually going to be it could be about 200. If everything happens as currently anticipated, it's about $200 million in project valuation and about 1,100 and almost just under 1,200 residential units added. So pretty impressive numbers. We hope the pandemic stays away and takes care of things and we're able to keep all these on track. And if so, should be seeing some significant private sector investment coming forward here in the next several years. So with that, I am certainly available to answer any questions folks may have.
What would be the procedure for the One Astor? If they say, hey, we really like to break ground, we have things ready, comes to us and RDA and council? How much do you need?
Well, we have to have it depending on the timing. If we want this thing in place, we certainly have to have the agreement in place. I think we have to have the district. If we want to count the valuation as of 1/1 of this year, I think we have to have it done. Everything procedurally done before October 1st, I believe, is the date. So certainly that if we need to know that, we need to know that pretty quick because it's like, oh, it's no problem. It's mid-June, as well as that 90 days that kind of plus or minus it requires to actually create a district that fills up pretty fast. So we're kind of getting on the crunch. So I'm assuming we're going to know. Probably make a determination on that, Brad, probably within the next 30 days, I would think. We're going to have some discussions and as soon as we can come up with and really, I think the key domino that falls to that is getting an updated agreement with the developer. So if we can agree on schedule and get everything ready to go. Now, again, if he's not going to start construction until next spring, if he's definitely not doing anything, we probably have some options in terms of making it as available as of 1/1 next year. But again, it's just kind of figure out what exactly is that going to be? So hopefully we'll get that resolved here in the next 30 to 60 days. So. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Dave?
This is Dave, and it's not, I know I'm not part of the list at all, but Diana had mentioned how much increment was going back onto the tax roll from our 3 closed earlier, and I just kind of missed it. Well, update me, was it like 58 million or something?
Let's see, hold on. What was that number?
So that was the increment that is part of the of the 3 closed TIDs. Remember, 2 of them don't have affordable housing, and so there's 1 year of delay before those will go back to the taxing jurisdictions. It was a total of $58,970,700 worth of increment from those 3 TIDs that will be going back to the taxing jurisdictions either this year or the following year.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to kind of make the statement that these TIDs are definitely performing. They're doing what they're supposed to, and it's pretty exciting that much is going back into the rolls within the next couple of years.
So he's showing off. That's what David was trying to do there. That's in case you guys missed that. That's what he was doing. So we're excited about it. And I guess to build on that, obviously, and adding of the prospect of an additional 200 million coming online with these additional districts. Obviously, we want to keep that trend going. We're liking to seeing the private investment that is being generated by these districts. We're very happy with at this point. So. Any other questions?
Right, if there are no other questions, we'll set the next meeting date as needed, and there might be one coming this fall if we're going to set up a new TID. Otherwise, I would take a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
Second.
And was that you, Brett?
Pete.
Yep.
Peter. Okay. We have a motion by Bradley, second by Peter. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned. Thanks, guys.
Peter, enjoy your vacation.
Thank